This is Kristin.
And I'm Steve, and you are listening to Cycling Together, a show about all things bikes, riding, and riding together.
Yay!
Today we are trying something out. We're coming to you straight from the Sprinter van.
The STBG Sprinter van.
So that when we hit the road, we're able to do the show. And we've experimented with a few different setups. We're still working on it, but for today, this is going to work.
As with all things with video, it's the light. It's just, where's the light coming from? So I didn't think this is where we would be recording from the front seat, but we'll give it a try. So today, we are going to be talking about a hotly debated topic, particularly in the mountain bike world, which is clipless or flats.
Or flats, yeah.
And before we get into it, I want to read this comment. I did a survey on our local Nimbus Facebook group, and we got this one comment. I want to read it. This is from our friend Alice, and she said, flats all the way. She tried clipless when I started to learn mountain bike, but spent way too much energy worrying about my ability to bail. Could not get clipped in when I had to get restarted on a hill. They were just adding difficulty. So I switched to flats and never looked back. And this is why I want to start with this. Despite several men making fun of me, quote, would you ski without your feet being in the bindings? And even some pushback from my husband. I'm a better rider now, but no need for me to switch at this point. Here's what I want to make sure we're really careful about. First of all, the comparison to downhill skiing does not apply.
No, it doesn't apply.
You cannot downhill ski without clipping in, right? If you try to, you're sledding.
You can half clip in.
There you go. Right?
If you're a pinhead.
But I want it to be clear that there is no wrong answer on this. And I think that's where some tension can come into the conversation.
Right.
Because I remember going to a clinic that I paid quite a bit of money for. I do clip in. And the first thing out of the instructor's mouth was, you should be on flats. And I was like, I paid too much money for you to be telling me my equipment's wrong. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about clipless versus flats.
This is a great. You're right. As you said, a hotly debated topic. At the same time, it's debated with no correct answer.
And it seems to be cyclical about who prefers what, which brings me to my survey, right? So I basically put into the Blackstone, I'd like to thank the members of the Blackstone Valley chapter of the New England Mountain Bike Association for playing with us. We had 79 votes say that, or 42% said that they rode clipless.
Okay.
And 105 votes, or 57%, said they rode flats.
Okay. So flats won in that survey.
It did. And some of the observations I had were, it seemed generational. It seemed like...
How did you get that data? Did you have numbers from that poll, or are you just from people you knew in the poll who answered?
Yeah, it's really more so my observations on it are anecdotal. I did not I don't know everybody in the group.
And we didn't
ask. I looked at their pictures. We didn't ask you.
Sure.
Yeah, we didn't say how old are you, what gender are you, what's your experience. It just was a straight clipless or flats. But of the people that I knew, the ones that were saying clipless tended to be Gen Xers. So of an age that maybe we started with clip in, that was the normal thing to start in. And so a lot of us maybe aren't, I always joke, you're going to take them off my cold, dead feet. We had some older riders who said they had started clipless, but it just, the risk of falling or just...
Well, we're going to address all that.
Yeah, we're going to say, so, but it did seem like it was... Well, I will say I was surprised. I was surprised by how high the percentage was.
Oh, in flats?
I was. But that's just, again, my bias kicking in.
I guess I'm not surprised given what I'm seeing nowadays.
So there you go.
But you're not in the shop.
Right.
And I'm seeing that sort of day in, day out of what's coming in the shop. So I guess I'm not surprised there. So we are going to be talking about, in this episode, really mountain bike pedals and gravel pedals. Road is a whole nother topic, really.
Yes.
It's a different thing in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Although there is crossover.
Yep.
But that's why it just deserves its own show at a future date.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So what would you like to start with?
We need to just start with the name, first of all.
Right.
So I have been trying at the shop to say clip in instead of clipless.
Right.
But my brain just knows clipless for decades. So I think that's what we're going to say, because that's what's going to constantly slip out of my mouth.
Yeah. Those are the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah. Let's talk about why it's called clipless when you are clipping into a pedal. And that is because back forever in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and earlier than that, road riders would use toe clips on their pedals. And this evolved, everybody probably knows what that is, but it's a cage on the top of the pedal with a strap. And road riders actually had a small cleat with a slot in it that slotted into the back of the pedal.
Oh, okay.
And so then you'd kind of wiggle your feet in there, strap it down. Now, professional road racers then never came out basically until the end of the race.
Okay.
So I wasn't really concerned about getting in and out.
Yes.
But then mountain biking evolved in the middle 80s and then started really picking up around 89, 90.
Wait a minute. You didn't use toe clips when you were mountain biking.
Yes.
Oh, no. What?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
So
the downside with the toe clips,
Yep.
I mean, there's the difficulty of getting in them and out of them.
Yes.
But then when you're not in them, they're heavy, and so they flip down.
Correct. So if you're on the flat side of the pedal and the toe clip is on the other side, it actually scrapes the ground with every pedal revolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That seems scary.
Right.
Okay.
So basically, people thought, hey, you know what? We're clipping in for all this sort of pedal security. We can pull up and all that, all the things that people thought they needed that kind of engagement with the pedal for, and then so mountain bikers just started saying, well, let's put that on our mountain bikes.
Right.
And it was a horrible idea.
What you think?
Yeah, it's just horrible. I still have now. Well, you talked about generational. I still have people today of a certain generation.
Yes.
And I would say it's 60 plus.
Yes.
And they're sort of, and a lot of it's like, oh, I'm getting back into riding. Here's my, they usually have a hybrid, and it's great. And they're like, oh, can you put like toe clips back on this? And I think we've talked about this briefly in another episode, but I basically say, no, I will if you really want me to.
Please sign this waiver.
But no, let's talk about this first, and I'll describe the why, and let's get you into something better, and that's usually going to be a mountain bike flat with pins, but we'll get into that.
And the thing with the toe clips also is, I mean, yes, they let you pull up, but they're really wrapped around your toe. They're not where, when we get into the clip in, that's in the middle of your foot. So the pulling you can't really pull up.
You can if you've got
toes?
if you've got the strap tight enough. But so every time on a mountain bike, you are constantly putting your feet down.
Yeah.
And so every time you need to do that, it takes effort to wiggle if you have the strap tightened down, you have to undo the strap before you, wiggle your foot out, and then every time you get back in, you have to wiggle your foot, find the side of the pedal with the clip, flip that around, wiggle your foot in, tighten the strap, oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, is right.
So
holy mackerel. That never even okay.
Yeah.
Again, it never occurred to me in mountain biking. So all right, so that is toe.
Yeah, and so
clips.
when Look developed the road pedal that you clipped into, it did not have a toe clip, therefore it was clipless, and so they were clipless pedals, and that's what we're going to go with for today, even though it confuses most people nowadays. And clip in is probably the better terminology, but it's again,
I don't think it's likely that you, me, and this podcast are going to change the entire industry and what they're calling, but we can try. Okay, the Look pedals, and we're not talking about road pedals, but just to be clear, the Look pedal, you're talking about those big ones where they're one-sided, and when somebody walks on a road bike, they look like they're a penguin.
They use what's called the Look Delta cleat. They were developed for road, but then it wasn't long after that Shimano developed the SPD pedal, the Shimano Pedaling Dynamics pedal. That was a double-sided for mountain biking.
Did anybody try to use Look pedals to ride mountain bikes?
Oh, yes. People have done it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And especially, I guess, sort of early cyclocross and a little bit of mountain biking.
Yes.
And so they were definitely used.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that's where it started. And I didn't actually realize Shimano the SPD, which is
Shimano Pedaling Dynamics.
I'll get it.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize that was the first clip-in mountain bike pedal. I didn't realize that's where it started.
That's where the mountain bikes one really started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really so prevalent.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And then there were a lot of, so in the 90s, there were a lot of copycat designs, but they were not interchangeable with each other. Okay. So everybody could make a similar looking pedal. Yep. But their cleat design was just a little bit different to avoid patent infringements. Yes. And so you couldn't use one clip. A lot of times people would say, "Oh, this kind of works," but it would like release a little bit later or harder or not at all, or you'd have to wiggle your foot a little more to clip in. So they weren't really cross compatible between brands at that time. And unlike now, when we'll talk about that.
Is after, say, SPDs, which there are now, because that patent has expired.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So you can find SPD-style pedals in a variety of brands.
Right.
What's the next most popular, you would say?
That would be Crank Brothers. Okay. Yeah, that would probably be the next one is Crank Brothers. And they make... it's almost it's a completely different design. It uses two steel bars that flex apart, and the cleat, as the cleat presses on the bottom of the shoe, presses down. Those two bars spread open and then snap in around that cleat to hold it in place. They have no release adjustment, but they're extremely easy to get into and extremely easy to get out of, and they have a lot of free lateral play for your heel before they release. They're really popular with cyclocross racers, and in fact, when we raced, we used those. Yeah. The cleats are brass, and they do wear out quickly. Okay. And also those two metal bars, they do now make a sort of a metal plate that goes on the bottom of your shoe. But well, here's a story. So I was in Las Vegas for the Interbike show, and they had the big Cross Vegas cyclocross World Cup race. Okay. And there was a industry race, so I was able to race that course.
Fun. And
the sole of my shoe cracked in half.
Oh.
Yeah, right before the race, during warm-up. Okay. It cracked in half because it turns out those metal bars, as your foot wiggles left and right back, it wears a groove into the sole of your shoe, and then that makes a weak spot, and then it snaps the sole of your shoe. Yeah.
How'd you do the race?
Not great, but that was more from the heat and the dryness.
Oh, but you still were able to race with those shoes.
That didn't help. That didn't help.
Didn't win that day.
No.
But they also, what's kind of cool about their system is you have the bare bones of it is called the egg beater.
So their lightest model, with no platforms, and it's actually four-sided. Yeah.
And then around the egg beater, they put other
aluminum platform, and that's called the candy, and then they put an even bigger, basically flat pedal sized platform around it, and that's called the mallet, and that's actually was a popular downhill pedal.
It was kind of cool when we were racing cyclocross, because if I remember correctly, you had the egg beater, you had the bare bones one. Mm-hmm. I had the next one with the small pallet, or the small platform, and I liked that because I didn't always, you're doing cyclocross, so you're running and you jump on the bike. If I missed the pedal, I still had enough of a platform that I could keep pedaling until my foot found the place, which was nice about that system, because we could still use the same cleats. We talked about this. It's nice if in your family you all have the same cleats and pedals.
I highly recommend that if you're a cycling family to use the same system. Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess the third one we should talk about in terms of the pedal systems for gravel and mountain is the Time Attack. Oh.
It's a great name.
Can't even remember the last time somebody came in with a Time Attack pedal. Okay. Yep. But the people now, the pedal company is now owned by SRAM. Okay. And everybody I believe who has them loves them.
Yes.
But it's just rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we use SPD now.
We use SPD. Yeah.
Across the board.
And so SPD uses a steel metal cleat that lasts a long time, and they have just like the egg beater and the candy and the mallet and so forth. They have multiple sizes of platforms, but their minimal one is still a bigger pedal than the candy.
Okay. You know what? Let's start with some of the concerns. And then we can go with pros on each of them. So the number one question I get is, what if I can't get out of them and I fall over?
Right.
The answer is, the first time you do it, you will.
Yeah, in a way.
I mean, I do say like it's a rite of passage that you are going to, we all have a story of some stupid way we fell. Let me be clear. Falling at speed is not the issue. It's when you stop and you have a brain fart because you haven't got the muscle memory yet.
The muscle memory. Yep.
And you tip over.
And you tip over. That's when everybody falls. They're like when they just put clipless pedals on their bike.
The first time that I used clipless pedals was with you, my darling then boyfriend. You brought me to a area called Vietnam in Massachusetts. You brought me to it was a power line, right?
Yeah, we were on the power line.
Very gravelly. We were not going for a ride. We were going to try these pedals.
That's right.
So if I remember correctly, I was wearing jeans because we were just going to just get on. And so I get on the bike. It's very rocky. Just again, power line, big puddle. And I hit the puddle and you start yelling, granny gear, which I did not know what that meant because I was new.
This is the 90s, so we had triples.
And so what is what does that mean? Granny gear.
The smallest ring in the front.
You just basically were like, spin, get to the easiest gear and spin. So I got stuck. I did my first track stand on for a hot second. And then I tipped over into the puddle.
Into the gigantic mud puddle.
I still married him. Our son fell into a bush. We have a friend who fell in front of a parked police car with the policeman in it.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like in some cases, but what tends to get bruised is your ego, not your
body.
Maybe a little bit your hip.
Maybe a little bit your hip.
But yeah, it doesn't tend to be, at least most of the time, it's a muscle memory thing. You have to get ready.
It is. And so a lot of times I will tell people to find a grassy area, right? And so you are riding. So basically you want to pedal around, find a place where you can coast, and you're going to be coasting for a little bit.
Yeah.
All right? Preferably in grass. And then basically while you're coasting, unclip. Clip back in, unclip, clip back in, unclip.
And it's important that you pick a side. We did have.
And it's important you pick your side for the first release.
This lovely customer, she gets credit for being the first person to comment on Facebook when we announced we were opening in Sherburne. And she kept falling over. And we finally realized it was because she couldn't decide which side to unclip first. Right. So sometimes she did her left and sometimes she did her right, which means she had no muscle memory and she had to make a decision every time. And you're trying to just always clip in and out on your same foot.
Yeah, and in fact, if you were to ask me which side do I unclip to put my foot down, I'd have to think about it for a second because it is automatic with me. And that's the whole thing is if you're thinking about it, now you're worrying about it. Wait, which side do I put down? No, that's where you get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other one on the whole falling thing is in the mountain biking. I want to get out quickly and put my foot down. So I think there is kind of this comparison to being locked into your ski boots, into your skis, where you have your downhill skis, where you have to like plonk. You have to take your stick is what I was just your ski pole, and you have to pop out your boot. But these are just a little bit of a twist, and you're out. And the SPDs are adjustable.
They are, and you can make the release tension less or more. Yeah. And I mean, I basically tell people once you're used to it, there is no difference of the time it takes to put your foot down, whether you're clipped in or you're on a flat.
It is. I mean, I will say I have been told this myself, where say I get into my own head about a thing, right? Some kind of feature. And I've had people say,
yes.
if I was in flats, I'd be more likely to try it. And I'm like, no, I don't think about the things running through my head about why I don't want to hit this feature have nothing to do with my inability to get out of my pedal, because I can get out of my pedal really, really fast.
Right.
That is not, but it's practice. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 plus years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when we started, when you got that first mountain bike, and then we got you clipless pedals almost right away, the choices were a toe clip on a plastic pedal with no pins, no grip, basically.
Okay.
Some of them were metal, and they had this like metal cage with, we'll call them nubs, but they were horrible as flat pedals.
Yeah.
So really it was toe clips, or you were clipping in. And you were clipping in the 90s. So if you started mountain biking in the 90s, that's probably where most, a lot of our respondents came.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
with,
That's why I was like, these feel like
now.
A lot of Gen Xers are answering this question. Yeah, I don't think it wasn't like you gave me an option. It was like, this is what you're doing.
Yeah, this is what you're doing. Because this is what you do. If you're mountain biking, this is what you clip in.
I mean, so that's cool. There's a lot more options than there were. What are some other fears or concerns?
Oh, the restarting in the hill, just like Alice said.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good one. That is where the sort of the size of the platform you choose or can be a little helpful, because you don't have to worry about clipping in right away. You just you can clip in the one side.
Yes.
All right. And then
get started.
And then now you've got to give a big push and a big oomph, because you're heading uphill, and the bike is going to instantly stop if you can't get that other pedal turned around.
Right.
Cranking. So, but that's where you can just get the foot on the pedal. Does not matter if you're clipping in. It's just on there, and you start going.
Right.
And this is where it takes some skill and proficiency, because I will then, in a couple pedal strokes, if it wasn't for me in right away, to then get clipped in.
Well, and this is kind of like the example I was talking about with cyclocross, right? Like, you pedal, and to your point, either you hit it just right, you're in, or you didn't, and I think it's kind of not letting it get in your own head that you have to be clipped in, because of course you don't. Depending again on the size of the pedal, your shoe, you might just keep pedaling without worry about clipping that other foot in, and it might slip in. Suddenly you're like, oh, there it went. I wasn't trying, but just in my pedaling,
that can happen.
It can happen. Or then you get to wherever you go, to that point where you can then think, okay, I'm going to try to get this.
Yeah, and a lot of times there'll be just this slight spot on the hill where you can take this sort of, actually I just put it like a microsecond, right? Yeah. Where you almost are you're not stopping pedaling, but you're almost pausing at one point on that pedal stroke, boom, and you wiggle your foot and you clip in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you have to almost let off the power for just that microsecond there, and then you can get in. Yeah,
and there are people, I will say, in the survey who said, in the summer, I mountain bike clip in, and in the winter with the fat bike, I do flats. And I get that, too.
Totally
sometimes
get that.
Is, and I think with gravel bikes, does anybody use flats on gravel bikes?
Yeah, so
I don't know.
On gravel bikes, it actually is... There'd be complete opposite on that survey if you did that, right?
Probably.
I to see people with gravel bikes coming in, whether for flats versus clipless, it is gotta be 90% clipless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which makes more sense. I think it's the technical aspect of mountain biking that really starts to kind of
get into people's heads,
wig people out, right? But let's talk about the benefits. The benefits of Let's talk about climbing hills.
Yeah, I mean, so climbing hills. This gets a little bit into the weeds of climbing hills.
We're here for it.
And especially, I guess we're not talking about a 4% grade up a dirt road. We're talking technical, steep. You were using body English to hump over rocks and roots, and you have to.
He said hump.
And you have to change the way your body sits on the bike in order to maintain traction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very much a lower position, keeping more weight over the front to keep the front down.
Right.
And you're going up a steep hill, you actually have to change the peak power arc of where you're putting down the power in the pedal stroke. And that's getting really nerdy.
That's how I do it every time.
And
I just change that pedaling
you might not realize it, but
that's
you
do. That's
and
what I mean.
I have power pedals that will tell me that.
Oh.
And so I've looked at this, and I've looked at where that sort of if you're just powering on a flat on your mountain bike, or if you're going up a steep climb, where the changes and where I apply the power, and you can't apply the power at the same height in the pedal stroke. Let's just say 1 o'clock, right? Yeah. Because your wheel will lose traction. You're starting that peak power phase later, more driving the pedal into the ground, right? Into the wheel, into the ground, and that helps you maintain that traction. So, and then as you're going up this technical stuff, you are able to say, you can clock the pedals a little bit easier because you can apply a little bit of power on the left, but now you actually that left pedal is about to hit a rock. So now you pull up on the right to get that extra power to get past that one particular rock. And so it's constantly changing where the power is applied, up or down, and then the peak power phase.
I think that's really the idea, is that when it is attached to your foot, you have a lot more flexibility to move it when and where you want. I actually remember, I think it was when it was the Sufferfest videos, they had a video that they wanted you to basically work on your pedal stroke to get it as basically active the whole way through.
Yeah, circular.
And so there was one where it'd say, okay, just push, and then it was like, now pull so that you could feel what that felt like, so that when you were out on the road or on the trails, you could be like, oh, this is me pulling on it, this is me pushing on it. The idea at the time, I don't know if this is still the idea, was that you wanted to be almost like pushing and pulling simultaneously for this most efficient type of, especially on the road, like more, I think that was more road.
You might have heard the term pedaling in circles, and that sort of applies to what you're talking about there.
Yeah. So, but there's also, you talked about the licking gravel, the big grade, you're in a really tough, steep, and you're fatigued. There are times where I will mentally shift, where I say I'm going to really focus on pulling up, because that muscle set hasn't worked as hard. Now, there are some downsides to it. I find that sometimes I over rely on my back muscles because I can pull up, but there can be times you're like, I got nothing left in the front, so let's see if I can. Yeah, you got nothing left in the hamstrings. Yeah, let's see if I can engage some more of some other of those underutilized muscles. So that's the big one. I mean, I know for me, going out on flats feels like riding without a seatbelt, which is so dumb. Like, it's not a safety feature, but it feels like because of how much time we've been on them. I think so. Now, this is where some of the controversy comes from the people with flats, which we haven't talked about yet, but they kind of say that some of the maneuvers that people do in clipless pedals is so-called cheating. I'm going to air quote that. Yeah, no. And it's not. It's utilizing the tool that you have in your disposal there. Don't be hating, because we got the tools. No. So, like on a lot of our rides, one of my morning rides I do is we're sort of connecting trail to trail to trail to trail, and we have to go over a bunch of some of these trails start right at the beginning of a big tall granite curb. Yes. And so you are sneaking across the road between the traffic. Yep. And now you have to go up over this curb at a slow pace, actually. Okay. Okay. And so you lift the front wheel up, and then all you have to do is just give this. You don't have to do the sort of the technically correct bunny hop technique, which you can learn on flats maybe a little better. You're just giving a little bit up. With your clipless pedals, right, and you're up and over without slamming your rear wheel into the edge of that granite curb. Right. I mean, I've heard the same.
The same thing, just going over rocks and roots.
Yeah, but I've also heard the thing I was told also when I was shamed for my pedals at this clinic was you were less likely to get yourself into trouble, right? Like you can kind of, with clipless, you can kind of push through into maybe stuff that you shouldn't be riding. That if you could, because you could cheat, right? Like you might end up.
Wait, you're saying they were telling you that you could basically go over your head in what the technical stuff you're tackling
because you were on clipless, where the flats were kind of a limiter.
That's
which I mean, I think there reaches a point where everyone wants to tell you what the right answer is, and that's what I really want to avoid. You know, I'm all for knowing the why some people prefer or think it's better, because I was told also that if I had flats, it meant my feet were going to be a more active, like I could shift them on the pedals. Mm-hmm. Okay, right? But again, to say to someone, so what you're doing is wrong, you know, that's where I get really, really grumpy, right? Especially if it's unsolicited. So,
I think that being in clipless pedals, what I see now, there's a lot of factors involved with this, but some of the technical climbs that I do that a lot of people can't, or on flats, tells me that there's something there, and it's and the technical terrain. Some of the technical terrain, which I do with a bunch of guys, most of which are in clipless pedals,
right?
And just some crazy stuff on some rock features.
I mean, there's no question we are biased towards
We are
clipless. It's what we prefer. It's what we grew up with. So you know, I don't think.
But we're going to talk about why flats are great too.
Yeah, but also I remember one of the kids we knew, teenager, who was racing, and you know, it's about 50-50, maybe higher in the race league, flats to clip in, and his response apparently to all the guys who were like, "Oh, why are you on clip in?" was, "Well, the pros do it." And I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that all the pros are riding clipless.
Yeah, when we say pros, all the cross country pros.
Yes.
And downhill, I would have to look at the current split on what the amount of downhillers
like
that are using it.
If you're watching Kate Courtney, you're watching Jenny Rizvid, you're watching Nino.
Yep.
They're all
clipped in.
Clipped in.
Yep, clipless pedals.
You know, and they go over some monster stuff. So that's my bias. Okay, so I think that about covers the concerns and the pros and cons of clip in.
Mm-hmm.
So let's
clip less. Remember,
clip less. I know. You know what? We said we're going to say clip less, and I've done a very good job of staying with clip in. Mm-hmm. I'm changing the industry. No. Okay. Flats. Let's talk about flats.
Flats. Okay.
Let's talk about. You mentioned it when I started riding. Mm-hmm. Flats were available, and they were largely garbage. Okay. Yeah. Why were they garbage?
So a flat back then was not really what it is now. It was a much smaller pedal.
Yep.
It did not have any metal pins to grip the sole of your shoe.
Yep.
It could have been metal, but they all were small, and they were all designed to take toe clips. So that if you didn't use it or not.
Yep.
Okay. And then they just basically had a couple of ridges built into the body of the pedal to sort of grip the shoe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there are still pedals out there like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
yeah,
they come kind of the standard. If you get a bike with pedals on it,
some of them are still like those old style, but a lot of the freebie pedals that have come with bikes now are a little bit more like a modern flat.
Let's actually address the elephant in the room, which is why don't bikes after a certain price point,
yes,
come with pedals?
That's a really good question.
I don't realize that
that's
as we're talking about it.
A good thing to address.
What's the price point generally that a pedal doesn't come with, and why?
Ooh, I don't know the exact price point, and it's going to vary by the brand, but it is going to typically be, I could at least say, under $1,000, and it might come with pedals out of the box to the bike shop.
Yep.
And over $1,000, it probably doesn't.
And why not?
And certainly, the more the pricier you get, that definitely does not come with pedals.
And it feels crazy because you're like, here's your bike, and now you have to buy pedals.
And the reason is just like we're saying, pedals are such a personal choice.
Yeah.
Does that rider want flat or clipless?
Right.
What kind of flats? What kind of clipless?
Yep.
And so there was a point where all the manufacturers said, why are we including pedals when 95% of these customers are immediately taking them off and putting something else on?
Right.
So it was, let's just not, we can lower our, well, I was going to say they can lower their price points. We can keep the money we're spending on the pedals for ourselves.
You're so funny.
Right. And then
yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But if a bike comes with pedals, like I know, say the Scott Active came with pedals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a starter pedal.
It's a starter pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that mean?
It's all of the pedals that we come with these bikes are low quality, so they might use just bushings instead of bearings inside, so they don't spin very freely. And they're usually, they're never going to have a metal pin, all right?
Okay.
And they're usually not going to be as large as a proper flat pedal should be.
Okay.
And so they are really just there because they know a person buying, say, a $500-$600 bike just wants it when they pick it up from the bike shop. They want it to be ready to ride. They don't want to have to spend that. Like, they're the kind of customer who's not going to understand why it doesn't come with pedals.
Yes.
And so they just want to ride.
Yep.
And these pedals will let you ride.
Okay.
The really cheap bikes, like Walmart bikes and so forth.
Yes.
The pedals on those that they come with are so bad in their bushings that they barely rotate.
Yeah.
And because of that, and because the fact that pedals have differential thread directions, that they actually unthread themselves from the cranks.
Differential thread direction means one side is, they're reverse threaded.
One side. The right
lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, except one side.
Yeah, the left pedal is opposite. So the left pedal is reverse threaded. So basically, you go clockwise to unthread it, to take it out.
Left as I'm on the bike?
Yes.
Or left as I'm looking at the front of the bike? So I'm on the bike, and it's my
your left leg.
Foot.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, don't laugh.
Pedals.
I have looked at a bike and been like, wait, left.
Yeah, and so the friction of those really cheap pedals, the friction as it rotates around its axle is greater than the strength of the tightness of the threads in the crank. And so what happens is it starts unthreading itself as you ride, and people don't notice this. And so it's basically clinging on to the final threads, and then it doesn't have enough grip in the crank, and then the threads strip out of the crank set, and you've destroyed usually your pedal and your crank.
Okay. All right. So that's the entry level.
That's the entry level pedal that comes with a bike. Yeah.
Presuming we're not talking entry level pedals, what is the advantage of flats? I mean, I think we kind of addressed it with some of our clipless stuff.
Well, you don't have any of that worry or that mental fear of not being able to get out.
Yep.
All right. You are able to, whereas on a clipless pedal, your foot is in a fixed position.
Yep.
Fixed meaning really fore aft. Not you still have heel play to allow your knee to naturally move as you go through the pedal rotation. But that allows you to do a little bit different things on a flat pedal, mainly heel drops. So on a flat pedal, you can drop your heel back down, and that can really help going over some downhill technical features and jumps.
Yep.
And you can't actually drop your heel down when you're clipped in like you can on a flat. And it doesn't seem like, why would that be different?
Yeah.
But if you try it, you're like, oh, I can't. I like my muscles and my ligaments in my calf won't let me drop my heel down as far when I'm clipped in as when you're
okay.
And it's probably where you can position your foot on the pedal.
Right. Okay. But that helps with stuff like where we clip in and that keeps it on the pedal. These pedals have...
But let's talk about the two types of flats. So you have one with metal pins, and it's basically little metal screws sticking up in the pedal body.
Yep.
And these can get bent, broken, missing, and so a lot of companies will make replacement pin sets to screw back in.
Yeah, actually, one of the people that responded, he posted a picture of he was replacing the pins in his pedal, and he was like, there's something very zen and mechanical about me sitting here taking care of my pedals. And I was like, you go, Brian.
and those pinned pedals come in both two flavors, basically a composite plastic body or a metal body, aluminum body.
Yep.
Aluminum bodies, they're definitely way more expensive than composite ones. This is another thing that a lot of riders will go back and forth on, which is better, because some riders will think the aluminum pedal, the body of the pedal itself is slipperier because it's made out of metal, whereas the composite pedal actually has the plastic itself has more grip. So you've got the grip upon the grip of the pedals. And so anyway, that's a whole nother argument there. And then
you like our arguments,
right?
In cycling.
and then you basically have a flat pedal that has pseudo pins. They're just they're plastic nubs molded into the pedal body, so they look like little pins, and they do something. They're sticking up and they're sticking into the sole and the tread of your shoe, so they are helping grip the shoe. But both of these designs are they're made to stick into your sole of your shoe.
Right. And
give you that grip to the effect where a pin pedal through the bottom of the pedal stroke, so sort of 12 to 6 o'clock, can in a way feel like you're clipped in, because your shoe is not going to slide around on that pedal. You're really going to be stuck to that pedal through that.
And even if I remember from my class, when you get into 6, 7...
a little bit around.
A little bit around because again, you can manipulate your angle. You can manipulate your angle. You can actually get a little bit of scoop too. It's once you get to like 9, 10, 11, obviously we're just using centrifugal force. Right. But so that's where the angling comes into play. They come in different sizes.
Yeah, the platform pedals, some companies will make a small, or the small and the large, right? Okay. And those are designed for different size feet. Some companies might give a shoe size to say which should be on which. Yeah. If I were to think about what a lot of companies say, I would say a men's 8.5, 9 and under would be a small, and over would be a large. Okay. But that's a rough rule of thumb based on some companies I know.
Right. Okay. As I said, I know with flats, it's kind of the conventional wisdom seems to be too that you get better fundamentals. Or you get better, I know if you're going to be, we have a friend who is just certified as a cycling instructor, and she needed to be able to demonstrate all the skills in flats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, learning some of the techniques like manuals and bunny hop, those techniques rely on a lot of body movement and loading of the bike and so forth, and really don't have a lot to do with your pedals. Yeah. And so learning the proper technique for those in flats can be better, because now there isn't any of that. Well, using the word cheat is I don't like using.
We're not cheating. We're just using the tools. But
yes, but to get a proper bunny hop really does not involve pulling up on the pedals with your feet.
Right.
Right? It not at all.
And if you're in clipless, that's going to be your first instinct.
It
is to pull up on your
Yes.
feet. So, again, to your point, it's not necessarily cheating, but it is they're just different dynamics. They're different, utilization.
Yeah, and you
of your
can
body.
do a proper bunny hop or a manual while you're clipped in.
Right.
But to get the fundamentals down to do that, you have to watch
What are the negatives?
The negatives. Well, I guess the biggest one are those metal pins are sharp. And they can do massive skin damage if the pedal spins around backwards and smacks you in the shin. If you put your foot down wrong and the pedal's in the front, and then just the slightest actually even brush by those pins can cut you.
Right. Cut you.
Yeah. They can really do a lot of shin damage, a lot of leg damage.
Which, I mean, I'm already not wearing skirts for some parts of the year. This reminded me years ago, I went to a client meeting and I was like, I'm going to wear dresses even though from cyclocross, my shins were completely ripped up. And as I was sitting at this conference room table, my client was across the way and he could see the bottom of my legs and he literally was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I'm fine. I just ride bikes." So they can really smack into you. I mean, we're already doing some damage, so I'll give that one a pass, I guess.
Yeah.
We're hurting ourselves a lot if it's going to be pins or if it's going to be because I've chucked myself off of a ridge.
Right.
I'm getting bruised. I mean, I think it just comes down to personal preference. And here's the one piece of advice I'm going to give to anyone in the sound of my voice. If you come up on a rider who's got some pedal, I don't care what it is, and you don't know that rider, or even if you do, the first thing you say is, "Can I give you some advice about your pedals?" And if they say no, shut the F up. And if you don't know them, don't say it. Don't. It's the unsolicited advice that gets really, maybe this is a girl thing. I don't think people come up to you and say, "Hey, Steve, you know what you should be doing?" But it happens to people like me and Alice quite a bit. And it is infuriating.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. It's infuriating. All right. I think that's it on pedals.
So I guess the other thing I wanted to mention about pedals was the axle size.
Oh, yes.
And the thread size.
Yes.
So all pedals that you're going to be dealing with in adult bikes are what are called 9/16 of an inch.
Okay.
That's basically the thread size.
Yep.
Okay. I am sure the entire world and the Europeans hate the fact that somehow an English thread size dominated pedals.
Whoops.
Don't know how that happened. It was probably because of the dominance of Schwinn, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know how that actually. That's a good one to research.
All right.
So there's also the half-inch pedals. Half-inch pedals is a little smaller, so therefore it would be a little not as much metal, a little bit weaker.
Okay.
And you'll typically find them on really tiny juvenile bikes.
Okay.
So 12-inch, 16-inch,
right,
and so forth. But there are two different pedal axle sizes.
But that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So double check that. All right. We'll have some articles. You also found a great article about the history of SPDs.
Yeah, and there's a great, Pink Bike has a great article about the history of SPDs, and it talks about the initial design and then the current design, which is now just a little like 25 years old, maybe. I think it was 2000 when the current design change came out. But fascinating article about the people who designed that.
All right, we have two things coming up. We've two pieces. First is a tech question that was inspired by somebody else's seen while scrolling.
Okay.
All right. This is our friend who said, "I can't find the post. I saw a clip of a front wheel of a bike in a stand. They spun the wheel, and as it spun, they aimed a blowtorch at the brake rotor and held it there until it was red hot. At the very end, I think I saw them hit the brakes and send a few sparks out of the caliper. Is this someone making a video to drive social media engagement, or is there a legitimate reason to do this, like a way to fix a warped rotor or do some sort of quick super bedding of the pads?
I missed this in your show notes because this is I did not see this coming, and but I have a good answer for this.
Well, that's good.
Well, I have the actual answer for this.
Gimme.
So, there are some people on the internet who will say, "Oh, your brakes are squealing."
Yes.
Right? You can just use a blowtorch.
Okay.
And you can heat the rotor up. You can heat that. Usually, it's in this case heating the pads up.
Okay.
Both of which will ruin the pads and the rotor. Okay. When we're talking about now, there are some people heating up the rotor. In this case, this might be they want to see. I don't know if this is somebody testing the temperature at which the rotor can go to before it loses braking power.
Yeah.
But when you heat a rotor up that hot, you're losing the temper in the steel, and you've ruined that rotor. It is done. So this is people just trying to be
social media engagement.
Yes.
You can't think of any.
There's no legitimate reason. No.
And we have watched enough Forged in Fire to know you should not be doing that to your metal.
That's right.
Love that show. Okay, so there you go. There's your answer. All right. The other thing we want to talk about is Consumer Reports. This is a scene while scrolling, also partially tech. Consumer Reports came out with a report that basically said a proliferation of third-party sellers means that bike helmets that don't meet federal safety standards can be easily bought online from sites including eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Shein, Temu, and Walmart. Now, I know we talked about helmets just recently with the kids, but tell me about consumer standards about helmets. Like, how do you know the helmet that you're buying is not a piece of poop?
There are a couple of helmet standards. ASTM makes a helmet standard, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission makes another standard, and they will usually have their little symbols inside a helmet if it's been tested to those standards.
Okay.
And then we've talked in a past episode, I think briefly, about the Virginia Tech helmet testing, which you can go to their website and look at helmets and their ratings. One of those is what you'd be looking for. I think Walmart had a recall of helmets a couple of years ago because they didn't meet any of those standards. Actually, I can see this sort of being an issue. Nobody looks to see if this helmet has been tested to one of those safety standards when they buy a helmet.
Yeah. I mean, we buy helmets. You go to a store or you go online, you see a helmet. It's pretty, especially when the kids are littler. You're like, do you like the color, honey? Would you like yours to have kitty ears or not? I guess I can see you kind of thinking a helmet's a helmet is a helmet.
And it's not at all.
But it's really not.
Yeah. And helmets can be... the helmets can be really expensive.
Yes.
Right? I mean, they can be sort of astonishingly expensive for what you're getting. And I haven't looked at sort of all the brands nowadays, but I would say it's probably hard to find a legitimate, safe helmet for under $40 to $50. Disregarding any clearance sales and so forth or what it might have originally been. So a lot of these helmets you're probably finding from some of these discount online places.
If it's coming from Temu, it's probably $4.
Oh, I would never buy a helmet from there.
Yeah. We bought silverware from there and it bends. I tried it once.
Yeah, if you're looking at a helmet that's only $15, $20, even $25, it's probably not, it's just not worth it.
And also Facebook Marketplace, I mean, I presume you can buy new, but anything used I would stay away from because you just, again, don't know. You don't know how old it is. You don't know how it's been treated.
You don't, right.
You don't know where it's been stored.
Yep, if it was setting in the hot sun. Yep. And also you might not know if it's been in a crash because a helmet that has had an impact on it can't also really be trusted.
Right.
You can do an inspection, and usually if you can't see any indications of a dent or in the cracking in the foam and so forth, you're probably okay if you also know the level of impact.
Yeah.
But this is why buying a used helmet is not a good idea.
All right. Well, Thank you, Consumer
And
Reports.
and they have a lifespan too. That styrofoam has a lifespan. So used helmets are already old.
Yeah. I remember we had an older couple come to the shop, and the husband was like, I think I might need a new helmet. How often should you replace it? And I was like, 3 to 5 years, and he goes, well, I should be on my 6th helmet by now. I was like, oh no. Anyway, all right. It's one of those things that you buy and hope you never use, right?
Right.
All right. Well, I think that is all we have for this episode from the van. Cycling Together with Kristin and Steve is a production of Steve the Bike Guy, an independent bicycle shop in Eastern Massachusetts, and Sundin Marketing.
If you like the show, please leave a review or share with a friend. For show notes, links, or to leave a comment, question, or topic suggestion, visit cyclingtogether.bike. And you can follow the shop on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at Steve the Bike Guy.
Thank you for joining the ride.
Thanks.
See you next time.
See you next time.